What if I told you that modern neuroscience has cracked the code behind history's most famous healings? For 2,000 years, we've called them miracles. But what if there's a hidden psychological mechanism that Jesus understood better than any modern therapist? Today, we're diving into 3 mind-bending cases that will completely change how you see the intersection of faith, psychology, and human potential. The truth will shock you, because what happened 2,000 years ago is happening in hospitals right now. Are you ready to discover the hidden science behind the impossible? Here's what most people don't understand about Jesus' healing miracles. They weren't random acts of divine intervention. There was a pattern, a psychological blueprint that modern science is only now beginning to decode. Take the woman with the hemorrhage who touched Jesus' robe. For 12 years she'd been bleeding, untouchable, cast out from society. Every doctor had failed her, yet one touch, and she was healed instantly. But here's where it gets interesting. Jesus didn't just heal her body. He said something that reveals the true mechanism. Your faith has made you well. Not I have made you well. Not God has made you well. Your faith. This isn't theology, this is psychology. Jesus was pointing to something science would discover 2,000 years later. The ancient world didn't have our vocabulary for psychological healing, but Jesus seemed to understand something profound about the connection between mind and body. He consistently used phrases that modern psychologists recognize as therapeutic techniques. Be it unto you according to your faith, as you believe, so it shall be. Rise, take up your bed, and walk. These aren't just spiritual commands. They're psychological interventions that activate specific neural pathways. What's even more fascinating is that Jesus often asked people what seemed like obvious questions. Do you want to be healed? To a paralyzed man, this seems absurd. But any modern therapist will tell you this is the first question in any healing process. Because wanting to heal and being ready to heal are 2 completely different psychological states. Jesus understood that healing begins in the mind, not the body. The mystery deepens when you realize that Jesus' success rate was directly correlated with people's belief systems. In his hometown of Nazareth, where people knew him as just a carpenter's son, he could perform almost no miracles. The text literally says, he could not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. This isn't about divine power being limited. This is about psychology being blocked. The revelation that changes everything. Jesus was the world's first master of what we now call the placebo effect. But calling it just the placebo effect is like calling Einstein just a patent clerk. The placebo effect is one of the most powerful healing mechanisms in human biology, and Jesus weaponized it with surgical precision. Modern research shows that placebos can trigger real, measurable biological changes. They increase dopamine, reduce cortisol, boost immune function, and even change brain structure. Dr. Ted Kapchuk at Harvard has documented cases where placebos worked even when patients knew they were taking placebos. The key ingredient isn't deception, it's expectation, ritual, and the therapeutic relationship. Now look at Jesus' method. He created massive expectation. Word of his healing spread like wildfire, creating what psychologists call pre-activation. People's brains were already primed for healing before they even met him. He used elaborate rituals, touching, anointing with mud, speaking in authoritative tones. He created a powerful therapeutic relationship based on unconditional love and acceptance. But here's where Jesus was a psychological genius. He understood that belief isn't just individual, it's social. When he healed the paralyzed, man lowered through the roof. The text says he saw their faith. Not just the man's faith, but the faith of his friends. Modern research on social contagion shows that emotions, expectations, and even physical sensations spread through groups like viruses. Jesus was creating healing epidemics. The woman with the hemorrhage is the perfect case study. She had already convinced herself that touching his robe would heal her. Her nervous system was flooded with healing chemistry before she even made contact. When Jesus said, "Your faith has made you well," he was giving her brain permission to complete the healing process it had already started. Here's the neuroscience. When we deeply believe something will heal us, our brains release a cocktail of healing chemicals, endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin, and growth factors. These aren't just feel-good chemicals. They have measurable effects on inflammation, immune function, and tissue repair. Jesus was essentially prescribing belief as medicine, and it worked because belief is medicine. The most mind-blowing part? Jesus seemed to understand that healing isn't just about removing symptoms, it's about identity transformation. He didn't just heal the paralyzed man, he gave him a new identity. Rise, take up your bed, and walk. The man went from victim to victor in a single sentence. Think of your brain as a sophisticated pharmacy. Every thought, every belief, every expectation triggers the release of specific chemicals. When you truly believe you're going to heal, your brain starts manufacturing its own medicine. Endorphins, stronger than morphine, anti-inflammatories more powerful than steroids, immune boosters that modern science can barely replicate. Jesus understood this pharmacy better than anyone. He wasn't performing magic, he was performing psychology. He was a master pharmacist who knew exactly which beliefs would trigger which healing chemicals. When he said, "Your faith has made you well," he was essentially saying, your brain's pharmacy just filled the perfect prescription. Here's the analogy that will blow your mind. Imagine your nervous system as a vast electrical grid, like the power system of a major city. For years, certain areas have been experiencing blackouts, chronic pain, illness, dysfunction. Traditional medicine tries to fix the blackouts by sending repair crews to individual neighborhoods. But Jesus understood something revolutionary. Sometimes the problem isn't in the neighborhoods, it's in the main power station, the brain. When Jesus healed people, he wasn't just fixing the symptoms. He was going straight to the main power station and flipping the master switch. He was rewiring people's entire electrical grid through belief, expectation, and neuroplasticity. The paralyzed man's legs weren't broken. His brain had simply shut off power to that area. Jesus restored the connection. The woman with the hemorrhage had been in a 12-year blackout, not just physically but psychologically. She was trapped in a cycle of shame, isolation, and hopelessness that was literally keeping her sick. When she touched his robe with absolute faith, she sent a massive surge of healing electricity through her entire system. Her brain's pharmacy immediately started producing healing compounds, her nervous system reset, and her body followed suit. This is why Jesus' healings were often instantaneous. He wasn't gradually treating symptoms, he was performing complete electrical grid resets. And the best part? This same power station exists in your brain right now, waiting for you to flip the switch. If this is exploding your head, leave your like so more people can discover these hidden truths. But wait, because the second case is even more shocking. Now here's where the Jesus healing code gets even more mind-bending. Let's examine the case of the man born blind from birth. This wasn't a recent injury or a psychological condition. This was a structural, physical limitation that had existed since birth. According to everything we know about neurology, this should have been impossible to reverse. The man had never seen, never developed visual processing pathways, never trained his brain to interpret light as images. Yet Jesus didn't just restore his sight. He created an entirely new neural network in a matter of minutes. When the religious leaders interrogated the man, desperate to debunk the miracle, his response was devastating in its simplicity. "One thing I know, I was blind, now I see." But here's what makes this case psychologically fascinating. Jesus used the strangest method imaginable. He spat on the ground, made mud, and smeared it on the man's eyes. Then he told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam. This wasn't efficient divine healing. This was elaborate psychological theater. Why the mud? Why the walk to the pool? Why not just speak the word like he did in other cases? Jesus was targeting something deeper than just the physical blindness. Modern neuroscience has discovered something called neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to rewire itself at any age, creating new neural pathways and connections. But here's the catch. Neuroplasticity requires three crucial elements: belief that change is possible, intense focus, and what scientists call novel experience. Jesus' mud ritual provided all three. The mud wasn't just symbolic. It was a powerful, novel experience that shocked the man's nervous system into a heightened state of awareness. The walk to the pool created sustained anticipation and focus. And Jesus' reputation had already established the belief that healing was possible. But there's something even more incredible happening here. The man born blind had spent his entire life developing what psychologists call learned helplessness. Society had programmed him to believe he was fundamentally limited, that his identity was the blind beggar. Jesus wasn't just healing his eyes, he was performing the most radical identity transformation in recorded history. He was taking someone society had written off as permanently broken and rewriting their entire neural programming. The revelation that will change everything. Jesus was performing what modern science calls neuroplastic intervention. He understood that the brain doesn't distinguish between physical limitations and learned limitations. Both create the same neural patterns of impossibility, and both can be rewired through the same psychological mechanisms. Dr. Michael Merzenich, the godfather of neuroplasticity research, has documented cases of people regaining sight, hearing, and mobility through targeted brain training. The key isn't just physical therapy, it's convincing the brain that change is possible. Jesus was performing neuroplastic intervention 2,000 years before we had the vocabulary to describe it. But here's where Jesus was operating on a level that modern science is only beginning to understand. He combined neuroplasticity with social validation. When the healed blind man faced skepticism from the religious authorities, Jesus didn't abandon him. He sought him out and validated his experience. Do you believe in the Son of Man? This wasn't just spiritual comfort. This was psychological reinforcement of the new neural pathways. Recent research on identity transformation shows that lasting change requires what psychologists call social proof. Confirmation from others that the change is real and permanent. Without this validation, people often revert to their old patterns. Jesus understood that healing without community support is temporary healing. The mud ritual reveals another layer of psychological genius. It activated what researchers call the embodied cognition pathway. When we engage multiple senses in a healing process, we create stronger neural connections. The texture of the mud, the anticipation during the walk, the cool water of the pool, each sensation was laying down new neural tracks in the man's brain. Here's the neuroscience that will blow your mind. The man born blind had to learn to see as an adult. His brain had to rapidly develop visual processing capabilities that normally take years to form in children. This process, called critical period plasticity, was thought to be impossible in adults until recent breakthroughs. Jesus somehow understood how to trigger critical period plasticity in a fully grown brain. The most incredible part? The man's identity transformation was complete. When the authorities tried to intimidate him, he stood up to them with confidence that shocked everyone. Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. This wasn't just physical healing. This was psychological liberation from a lifetime of learned helplessness. Jesus had taken someone society labeled as permanently broken and proved that no limitation is truly permanent when you understand how to rewire the brain. Your brain is like a massive city with millions of roads and pathways. When you're born, it's like having a brand new city with unlimited potential for growth. But as you experience life, certain roads get built while others remain empty lots. If you're born blind, your brain never builds the vision highways. Those neural pathways remain undeveloped wilderness. For 2,000 years, we believed that once you missed the construction window, those highways could never be built. Adult brains were thought to be like cities with fixed infrastructure, unchangeable, permanent. But Jesus understood something revolutionary. With the right psychological intervention, you can build new highways at any age. The mud ritual was like sending a construction crew to prepare the ground. It created what neuroscientists call a neuroplastic state, a heightened condition where the brain becomes malleable and ready for rapid change. The walk to the pool was like surveying the land, planning the route, and the washing was like breaking ground on the new construction project. But here's the analogy that will transform how you see human potential. Think of learned helplessness as a massive roadblock that's been sitting on your neural highways for years. Everyone tells you it's permanent, that you'll have to take the long way around for the rest of your life. You start to believe the roadblock is just part of the landscape. Jesus was like a master engineer who could see that the roadblock wasn't actually part of the original infrastructure. It was just debris that could be cleared. The man born blind had spent decades believing his neural highways could never be built. But in one revolutionary moment, Jesus proved that the construction crew was still on site, ready to work. The most powerful part of this analogy: the man didn't just get his sight back, he got his potential back. His brain didn't just learn to see, it learned that it could learn anything. Once you realize that your neural highways can be rebuilt at any age, every limitation becomes temporary. Every impossible becomes not yet. Jesus was teaching neuroplasticity before we had the word for it. And subscribe now, because the third case that comes next will completely change your perspective on human nature. Now we arrive at the most mysterious and powerful case of all, the mass healings. Picture this scene. Thousands of people gathered around Jesus, and instead of healing one person at a time, entire crowds were healed simultaneously. The sick, the blind, the paralyzed, all experiencing instant recovery in the same moment. Modern medicine calls this impossible, but modern psychology calls it something else entirely: collective emotional contagion. Here's what makes this case absolutely mind-bending. Jesus understood something about group psychology that we're only now discovering in research labs. Emotions, beliefs, and even physical sensations spread through crowds like wildfire. When one person in a group experiences something powerful, mirror neurons in nearby brains start firing in the same pattern. It's called neural coupling, and it can create shared experiences that seem supernatural. But Jesus took this phenomenon and weaponized it for healing. He didn't just gather crowds, he orchestrated them. He positioned himself so his voice would carry, used gestures that engaged visual learners, created moments of silence that allowed anticipation to build. He was conducting a symphony of collective consciousness, and the instrument was human neurology. The most fascinating part? Jesus often healed people who weren't even asking for healing. They came out of curiosity, maybe skepticism, but got caught up in what researchers call emotional contagion cascade. When the person next to you suddenly throws down their crutches and starts walking, your brain automatically starts preparing for the same possibility. Mirror neurons fire, stress hormones drop, healing chemistry floods your system. Here's where it gets scientifically incredible. Recent research on group meditation shows that when people synchronize their brainwaves, They can influence each other's physiology at a distance. Heart rates synchronize, breathing patterns match, even immune function improves across the entire group. Jesus was creating healing fields that extended far beyond his physical presence. The mass healings reveal the deepest secret of all. Healing isn't just individual, it's collective. When you change the psychological atmosphere of a group, you change the biological reality of everyone in that group. Jesus understood that consciousness isn't locked inside individual skulls. It's a shared field that can be influenced, directed, and transformed. This is why his healings often happened in public, in crowds, with witnesses. He wasn't just healing individuals, he was teaching entire communities that healing was possible, normal, expected. He was rewriting the collective, unconscious of humanity. The final revelation that connects everything. Jesus had cracked the code of collective neuroplasticity. He understood that when groups of people share intense emotional experiences, their brains literally sync up and become capable of things that isolated individuals cannot achieve. Modern neuroscience calls this neural synchrony, and it's the most powerful healing mechanism on the planet. Dr. Mauricio Delgado at Rutgers has shown that when people's brainwaves synchronize, they share neural resources. Your brain's healing capacity isn't limited to your individual chemistry. It can access the collective healing power of everyone around you. Jesus was creating healing networks that amplified everyone's neuroplastic potential exponentially. But here's where all three cases converge into one mind-blowing pattern. Jesus wasn't just healing individual problems. He was systematically dismantling the psychological infrastructure of limitation itself. The woman with hemorrhage learned that shame couldn't block healing. The man born blind learned that impossible was just a word. The crowds learned that healing could be shared, multiplied, exponentially increased. Each healing was building towards something bigger, a complete rewrite of humanity's beliefs about what's possible. Jesus understood that the real disease wasn't physical illness. It was the collective human belief in permanent limitation. He was performing psychological surgery on our species' self-concept. The neurological evidence is overwhelming. When groups believe intensely in the same outcome, they create what researchers call field effects. Measurable changes in the electromagnetic environment that can influence biology at the cellular level. Jesus was generating healing fields so powerful that people were healed just by entering his presence. Here's the connection that will blow your mind. Every single healing followed the same three-step pattern. First, interrupt the pattern of limitation through novel experience, mud touch, ritual. Second, install new neural programming through belief and expectation. Your faith has made you well. Third, lock in the change through social validation and identity transformation. Rise, take up your bed, go show yourself to the priest. This wasn't random miracle working. This was systematic neural reprogramming on a massive scale. Jesus had reverse-engineered human consciousness and figured out how to hack the operating system. He understood that healing isn't about fixing what's broken, it's about remembering what's possible. The final piece of the puzzle, Jesus consistently pointed away from himself and toward the person's own inner capacity. Your faith has made you well. As you believe, so it shall be. He was teaching people that the healing power wasn't external, it was their own neuroplasticity waiting to be activated. Imagine human consciousness as a massive Wi-Fi network. Most people think they're operating on individual, isolated connections, just their own brain, their own limited bandwidth, their own healing capacity. But Jesus understood something revolutionary. We're all connected to the same network, and when we sync up properly, we can access unlimited bandwidth. When one person in the network experiences a breakthrough, sudden healing, impossible recovery, miraculous transformation, that success gets uploaded to the shared server. Everyone else on the network suddenly has access to that new programming. This is why Jesus' healing spread like viruses through communities. One person's breakthrough became everyone's possibility. The three cases we've explored show the complete network architecture. Individual healing, woman with hemorrhage, teaches us how to access our personal bandwidth. Neuroplastic transformation, man born blind, shows us how to upgrade our operating system. Collective healing, mass miracles, reveals how to tap into the unlimited power of the shared network. Here's the analogy that ties everything together. Think of limitation as a massive software virus that infected humanity's collective consciousness thousands of years ago. This virus convinced us that healing is rare, that miracles are impossible, that change is slow and difficult. Jesus was like the world's greatest cybersecurity expert who figured out how to debug the virus and restore our original programming. Every healing was like installing an update that overwrote the limitation virus. The woman learned that chronic conditions aren't permanent. The blind man learned that impossible is just corrupted code. The crowds learned that healing can go viral when enough people update their software simultaneously. But here's the most incredible part of this analogy. The network is still running. The healing protocols Jesus installed are still active, still available, still downloadable by anyone who knows how to access them. Modern research on neuroplasticity, placebo effects, and collective consciousness is essentially reverse engineering the code that Jesus was running 2,000 years ago. The limitation virus is still spreading, but so is the healing network. Every time someone experiences impossible recovery, everyone else's bandwidth increases. Jesus didn't just heal individuals, he upgraded the entire human network. These three cases reveal the hidden pattern. Jesus understood that healing happens in the brain first, then in the body. He was performing neuroplastic intervention, activating placebo pathways, and creating collective healing fields that modern science is only now beginning to understand. The woman with hemorrhage, the man born blind, and the healing crowds all prove the same revolutionary truth. Limitation is learned, and what's learned can be unlearned. If these three cases exploded your mind, smash that like button and subscribe to not miss our next mysteries. And tell us in the comments, which of these revelations surprised you most? Hit the bell so the algorithm doesn't lie to you. And if you know someone who needs to see this, share it, because these truths need to be known.